You might have seen the very dashing Olly Richards on YouTube and thought, wow, I want to learn Spanish and I see he's got a course on it. I wonder if it's any good. Don't worry, my friend, I've got you. I've done the course and this is an honest review of how it went. Put the kettle on. Hello friends, this is going to be an honest review of Olly Richards' Spanish Uncovered course. So I'm going to break this review down into 3 parts. The first part is going to be what's in the course, what do you get for spending your sweet wonga on Olly Richards' course. Second part, I'm going to go on to talk about the things I liked about the course, and then finally I'm going to talk about the things that maybe could have been improved on the course, just so I can be honest with you and you know exactly what you're getting if you decide to go ahead and buy the course like I did. Empecemos! So the course is basically based on the idea of learning a language through reading a story. Once you pay your money, you're going to get some introductory videos first of all at the start of the course, and then immediately after that you're going to jump in and read a story in Spanish. Now obviously if you're a beginner Spanish speaker, you won't know what's going on. That's the point. So you have to get used to this idea of being unfamiliar with learning a language. I think that's quite useful for beginners. Sometimes you think, I should know what's going on. I need to now go and look up all the words. You don't. Just keep reading through. You start off with chapter 1, read through it a few times to get a feel for it. There is audio that goes along with the text. So every lesson, you can think of it as like every chapter is a lesson, or vice versa, however you want to think of that. And so you'll jump in and you'll read the text a few times. You can listen to the audio. You can read and listen at the same time if you want. Then after that, every chapter has got some lessons, video lessons that go along with them. And the first one is always on cognates. The cognates are words that are near enough the same between English and Spanish, or got some kind of relationship. And so you can kind of pick up these words for free. And so it's a quick way to get lots of vocabulary that you can immediately start using in Spanish. There is then a vocabulary lesson. So the vocab lesson is words that are just Spanish words that aren't the same as English, that you need to get taught in order to pick up the language rather than the free cognates. There is then a grammar lesson. So the grammar lesson just puts stuff on the map. It isn't we're going to spend hours and hours on this stuff. It's just to give you an idea of there are these rules in Spanish that you would expect to see, but Olly isn't sort of ramming the grammar down your throat, which is good for people like me because I'm not so hot on the grammar stuff. And then there is a pronunciation lesson where a native speaker then explains a bit of the pronunciation for some words, and that might include differences in pronunciation, which is really useful when you're getting between like your D's and your T's, or those sorts of things, and how there's subtleties in those bits of the pronunciation of Spanish. And the material that you get alongside those video lessons, as I say, you've got that story. Scroll all the way to the bottom once you log in, and there is a PDF of the whole story. Otherwise you get like chapter by chapter, which is a bit awkward. So just download the whole story in one big chunky PDF. I say big and chunky, it's not the longest story in the world, but there you go. And then you get the audio for every chapter, or you can just get one MP3 with the whole audio for the whole story. And alongside all of that, you then get some worksheets for every chapter that have questions about grammar or vocabulary to check your comprehension, and some other activities like that. And below all of that, below every bit in the story, every little lesson, if you want to think of it that way, there is a chat and there is a moderator who you can put your questions in there, and a moderator will come and answer the questions for you if you've got any problems. Now, what I'll say about the course before we move on to the likes and the dislikes, the course does involve you putting in the effort. The course won't work if you just expect you've paid your money, I'm going to get fluent in Spanish. It does involve you reading chapters that you don't understand and listening to audio that you don't understand, but then slowly you put together this puzzle that is the Spanish language. I think this is Olly's whole jam. You uncover the language through reading the story, but don't expect that someone is going to do the work for you. It does involve you making a certain amount of commitment, be it hopefully daily or however much you can do in order to make sense of the language and get as much as you can from the course. So what did I like about the course? First of all, I like the fact that it follows comprehensible input. So the idea that you are learning a language through stuff which becomes comprehensible to you. It's not immediately comprehensible first of all when you first start, but quite quickly you're into the point that you can start to understand the chapters more or less as you're reading them. For a beginner, it's quite difficult to just immediately understand stuff because you haven't got the language. You are following the input hypothesis that your friend of mine, Dr. Stephen Krashen, has come up with along with some others. And so following that method, I think is really, really helpful, and it's less dry than if you just sat with a textbook and went through it like you did in school, and everybody hated learning languages that way. And the chapters aren't actually too long. So it might seem, oh, there's a lot of reading to do here when you first jump into the chapter, but quite quickly you get used to it, and they really aren't that long at all. You know, you're talking about maybe a side of A4 realistically. It's spaced quite widely as well, so it makes it seem like you're reading more than you are, which is, you know, good for the ego. It's not actually, they're not that long. So for beginners, you can just read it and it's not overwhelming, it's broken down, and you know you're going to get the support in the other videos. So you kind of read it a few times, you get a feeling for it, maybe you're not quite sure on some bits, and then you go and watch these videos that then start to explain it. You can then go back to the text. It does involve obviously having to jump back on it and read the text or listen to it quite a few times. So you've listened to the chapter and read it many, many times before you have moved on to the next chapter. So you learn grammar and vocabulary in context, which is great as well. I've said before in other videos, I've struggled in learning grammar when you're just taught the rules of a language. It doesn't make any sense to you because, of course, I haven't got any examples of that. I haven't got the language in me. I don't yet know how to speak that language. So the grammar rules don't really help. There is a bit of chat about grammar in this course. It is what it is. I'm not huge on grammar, but we all have our different methods, so that's fine, and it at least explains it to you. It doesn't expect you to know it all instantly, but when you are taught grammar, it is in context. So you see it in the story, and then in the video that Olly goes through. Olly explains the grammar in the story and also gives some other examples, so you do get more of a feeling for it slowly, but he doesn't sort of expect you to immediately know it. Now, Olly's put lots and lots of cognates in the text. So the text has got loads of words that you kind of recognize, some of which are pretty much just the same word from English, but just with a Spanish accent, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. And so you get lots of words for free. So the use of cognates is a really good way to immediately get you to the point that you can start to understand bits of this story. And of course, the rest of the course is explaining the bits that you don't know so that you can uncover this story and get more level of comprehension. Now, some people like the worksheets. Now, the worksheets are a lot more like the kind of traditional approach in that you're being given these comprehension questions on what you've learned in the story, including grammar and other things like that. I'll talk a bit more about those in a minute, but certainly a lot of people like to feel like they're doing something, and you can print these worksheets off and do those as well. Oh, and another thing about the worksheets, there are also worksheets which you can I was going to say take with you or email to. If you've got a Spanish tutor, there are sort of points of conversation to reinforce some of the Spanish that you've learned in that chapter. And so you can use those worksheets in a lesson if you're doing any speaking practice already. So that might be quite useful to a few people as well. And lastly, I do like the fact that there is at least one character who is in this story who appears in one of the other stories that Olly's done as well. So it starts to tie the various books he's done together. It's not going to be earth-shattering, and I won't spoil it for you for those of you who have read any of his other books, but it's kind of cool to have some continuity with the different characters. So it's important you try things like this with all of the available information, so I'll be honest with you about some of the things that I thought could be improved. First and foremost is the fact that you immediately start reading in the story. Now, some people would disagree with this. I don't know the evidence on this, and I'd be really interested if you've got some evidence or you've got some experience around this. Please let me know in the comments below. But some people I've read say about when we read, we sub-vocalize. So we kind of pronounce in our own head, if you want to think of it any other way. We make the sounds in our head of what we're reading. You are reinforcing potentially poor pronunciation because you don't yet know how to pronounce Spanish words when you're reading the text. I would be interested to know people's thoughts on that, but that's certainly something I noticed. There were some words I'm like, oh, I don't quite know where the stress is on that word, or even how those vowels fit together. So that's something to bear in mind. So point number 2, the story is fine, but it's not captivating. I would love it if the story, started off the 3 friends stand around the dead body and then they didn't know who killed them and whatever. The story's good enough for the course. The story's good enough that you can follow the course. There were a few times I wanted to know what happened in the next chapter, but it didn't really grab me. It's difficult though, of course, because as a beginner Spanish speaker, you haven't got enough words yet to maybe describe things in the most in-depth way, but certainly that's something to bear in mind. You just have to sort of stick with the story in order to learn enough Spanish to move on to more advanced stuff. And then another point about this is the tuition is entirely in English, which obviously, it's a course for English speakers learning Spanish. But there are times in the course you could start to drop in some Spanish words, por ejemplo, and then you could then give people more input. I know, speaking of another course, there's Chinese 0 to Hero, which as you move up in courses, it then becomes entirely or almost entirely in Chinese. Yes, of course, it's a big beginner course, but it would be fun to add a few words here and there to get people just their brains firing and thinking of some more stuff. So that will be a small bit to improve, but it's not going to totally change the course. I just thought that was a missed opportunity for Ollie and the team. Now, another thing is, personally, I've decided I don't really like learning grammar. I don't find it enjoyable, and I don't actually find it that helpful for me. The course does have these grammar lessons and has grammar in the worksheets. It's trying to cater for everybody. And so if you like grammar, that's absolutely fine. I have to admit, I started off trying to do the worksheets, and then I found myself, I didn't enjoy them, so I just stopped doing them. And I just wanted to find out what happened with the story and understand it well enough that I could move on to some other content, which I think is probably the best way to think about your language learning. It's your language learning. You like the worksheets, go and do the worksheets, lovely stuff. Just enjoy it. If you don't want to, like me, don't do it. The key thing is lots and lots of input, and then move on to get more input. And then the final part of my criticism, if you want to say that, it does encourage speaking from the beginning. Now, everybody's got a different opinion on this. Nobody is right. You can just do what you want. You're all adults. For me, I've decided that I don't want to start speaking from the beginning, and possibly because of trying it when I was doing this course, the tutor I had would correct my grammar because, of course, I was brand new to trying to learn Spanish and speak it. I'd say things wrong. My grammar would be incorrect. I was probably ingraining poor pronunciation, and the classes weren't that enjoyable because I couldn't yet talk about things, firstly to a sufficient level, and secondly, I couldn't talk about things that were that interesting just yet because my Spanish wasn't good enough. Some people I know, though, trying to speak is very motivating to them. So that is just my personal preference. So the big question, would I recommend it to someone? Honestly, I would. And the reason I say that is it gets you out of that initial beginner stage where you can see all this interesting content, but you can't understand any of it. You just want to quickly get up to speed with a certain level of Spanish, and it gets you to, I'm sure Ollie will say, probably gets you to A2, gets you out of that beginner bracket, so you can start to maybe try some other graded readers or watch some other videos in Spanish. And for that reason, I think it's good. I didn't enjoy the worksheets, so I just didn't do them. It encourages speaking from day one. I tried it, I decided it wasn't for me, but you can try it yourself. And ultimately, if you want to speak from day one and you like that, you can. You can still do this course and not speak at all. And that's the joy of being an adult in language learning. Do what you want to do, and if anybody judges you, you can tell them just to And for beginners learning a foreign language, there is something I really, really recommend, and it's this video here. It's a fantastic method to learning a foreign language, and if you're in these early stages, it's really worth checking out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.